Coming up on Tech News Weekly, Jason Howell and I talked to Dan Moren of Six Colors about Apple making some changes to try and deal with developer complaints, but also upcoming and in progress court cases. They are all about answering the question of the antitrust concerns that have been put forth. We are also joined by Iain Thomson of The Register to talk about 3D printed meat. Is it good? Is it gross? Or is it somewhere in between? Then we round out the show with our stories of the week. I talk about Apple listing the first states that will offer digital IDs that you can launch via your iPhone. And Jason Howell goes hands-on with the Galaxy Z Fold 3, and I ask him so many questions. It's all that coming up on Tech News Weekly. Stay tuned.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust. This is TWiT.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 199, recorded Thursday, September 2nd, 2021. This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Akamai. Akamai is the world's largest distributed edge compute platform. To deliver and protect your digital experiences worldwide, tap into Akamai for its unrivaled intelligence, performance, and scalability. Visit akamai.com/TNW today to learn more.
And by Melissa. The U.S. Postal Service processes more than 98,000 address changes daily. Is your customer contact data up to date? Try Melissa's APIs in the developer portal. It's easy to log on, sign up, and start playing in the API sandbox 24/7. Get started today with 1,000 records cleaned for free at melissa.com/twit.
And by checkout.com. Modern businesses need flexible payment systems that can help them adapt to change, grow, and scale fast. Checkout.com is a leading cloud-based global payment solutions provider. Request a free, no-commitment demo at checkout.com/TNW.
Hello and welcome to Tech News Weekly, the show where every week we talk to and about the people making and breaking the tech news. I am Mikah Sargent and I'm back, baby.
You're back. Welcome back. Missed you last week. I'm Jason Howell. Held the fort down without you, and it's not easy to do.
No.
The fort is much easier held up when there's two of us.
Yes. So you didn't have to. I know you had to Atlas this thing last week, but I'm glad to be back to help shoulder the burden, both literally and figuratively.
I didn't have enough nails and vice grips to pull it off, but somehow I figured it out.
I'm very impressed and very proud. We should get started with the show today.
Let's do it.
There's been a lot of news surrounding Apple and its App Store lately. Lots of news surrounding the way that it is working and not working with developers, the concerns surrounding Apple's approach to sort of fair practices in the App Store, and then a number of suits across not just the country, but the world involving these antitrust concerns that have been sort of thrown Apple's way. And there's been some kind of, over time, there have been some developments that have taken place. And so I wanted to bring someone onto the show to talk about those developments. And so we have Six Colors' own Dan Moren here with us today, coming to us from Boston, which has way too many sister cities and won't give Petaluma one. Hello, Dan.
Hi, Mike. I want to let you guys know that I make my forts out of pillows so I can hold them up myself. It's a lot easier that way, trust me.
That is smart.
Pro tip for you.
Yeah. Well, speaking of being a pro, which is the segue I'm going with, you are a pro when it comes to Apple. And I wanted to talk to you, actually, a couple of things. This is interesting because I brought you in to talk about Apple and its plans for allowing reader apps to link to their sites. But before we get to that, I think it's good to kind of establish a little bit of the environment right now and what's going on at Apple when it comes to the App Store. So could you actually talk before that about Apple's decisions when it comes to how it settled the class action lawsuit with developers?
Sure. Yeah. So Apple got was involved in this class action lawsuit, which was brought by a certain group of developers. And essentially, these developers were alleging that some of the ways that Apple does its business is not exactly fair. So Apple decided to settle this case. Obviously, the developers agreed to that, potentially in large part because the chances of beating Apple in a straight courtroom case was not going to work very well. And so as a result, they gained what I think a lot of media companies framed as sort of concessions from Apple, but which actually turned out to be things that were more like, well, we're doing things this way, and we promise we'll keep doing them this way for at least a little while. So there were very few actual changes to the policies as a result of that. I think the biggest that sort of came out of it was there was one about letting developers use more price points, essentially being able to set their prices at more levels than Apple had given the option before, which is good for developers, but also not bad for Apple because Apple still makes a cut no matter what that price point is. There was also a concession about essentially not banning or in other ways like punishing developers for reaching out to customers via email, sort of outside of the confines of an app in order to be able to sort of give them other options or talk to about like other communication, communicate to them other things about their app. And so those were sort of a few of the biggest ones. I mean, there's other stuff in there. There's like Apple launched its small business program last year, which is the one that cuts the percentage of Apple's take to 15% if you're making less than $1 million. And it promised it would keep doing that for 3 years. The downside to that potentially being that it won't refine the program, and the program already has some issues. So this is not necessarily a straight up win for developers. So overall, I think the concessions gained in that class action lawsuit for developers themselves were fairly minor. That didn't stop Apple from patting themselves on the back and declaring that the App Store continues to be an economic miracle.
Yes, indeed. There was, I know, a lot of talk about how this didn't quite feel like it was sort of sticking with the stuff that was already there for the most part, and not really bringing in anything new, but making it seem as if that was the case. Now, that may be the case with that, and there's been a lot of coverage of Apple's work with developers or lack thereof. But a more recent story, in fact, just on Wednesday, Apple, in response to an investigation from the Japan Fair Trade Commission, has made some, or is going to be making some upcoming changes to its App Store agreement and policies. Could you talk about what's going on here and what Apple has decided it's going to do?
Yeah, this is really interesting because it's clearly Apple trying to sort of manage this rising tide of investigations and regulators and governments and legislators all looking into this, the way the App Store does business and the antitrust concerns around it. And so as a result of this is an agreement that they made with the Japan Fair Trade Commission that essentially says we will allow developers of so-called reader apps, which is a category that Apple has basically come to define anything where you get content or subscribe to a service outside of an app and then access it using an app on your phone. So for example, if you buy a book on your Kindle and you want to read it in the Kindle app on your phone, that's a reader app. You can't use the Kindle app on your phone to go buy a book from Amazon, but if you've already bought that book, you can read it on your phone. If you subscribe to Netflix via Netflix's website, for example, you can access Netflix on your phone, but you can't necessarily subscribe to Netflix on your phone. And so Apple is basically making a concession here, which is saying, look, we will allow developers of these types of apps to put a link in their app that will let users, and this is specific to what they said, though they haven't spelled out everything about this, they say for users to set up or manage an account. So that can mean a lot of different things. We haven't seen clarification from Apple about exactly what the details are, and the devil is in the details when it comes to Apple. Apple has shown no reluctance in the past to basically spell out very, very specifically where, when, how apps can like provide links to outside material or how they have to do things. So I think the guidelines, which it's promised to update in advance of this rule taking effect, are going to be very telling in terms of saying exactly how developers can do this. And I'll also note it is as they clarified a single link. They're allowed one link outside of their app.
Okay, interesting. So then let me ask you this. this change for developers, I think, be they big or small, there's lots of applause going on there, I think, and folks are looking forward to this change. But I'm curious, sort of your personal take is sort of stepping into the shoes of the everyday user. Because one thing that I found, and I'm curious, if you've anecdotally experienced the same thing, is on rare occasions, I will have to explain to someone who is not as steeped in technology as you and I are, why, for example, they can't buy an audiobook from Audible, perhaps, in the Audible app itself, unless they have credits, in which case they can use the credit to do that. And that can come up in so many different ways. And so I'm curious, do you think that this change is one that is made truly in the interest of the everyday user, or is this something that is ultimately being done to sort of fall in line with what legislation has happened and could happen based on how Apple responds to it?
I think that from Apple's perspective, that they would rather have not done this. And I think that they're doing it in order to sort of manage their way out of what could have been a lot worse if they had not decided to sort of play ball with the JFTC in this case. And it may be sort of presaging how they're going to deal with a lot of these other challenges they're seeing from regulators and legislators as well, as like trying to find a compromise. I do think it's a win for users because, as you said, I have also experienced problems where people open up their app and they're like, well, I have this app for Netflix. I downloaded Netflix. I installed it on my phone. How come I can't sign up for Netflix on it? And it's weird and it's confusing. And having to buy your Kindle books via a web browser and then jump back into the app to use them is also, it feels user hostile. And this particular rule that Apple's had in place for many years now has always struck me as a bit of something that feels like we're going to shoehorn customers into using our system, or essentially they'll have to go through and jump through all these hoops in order to get content. And that's been great for Apple's bottom line, but I don't think it's been great for either developers or for customers. So it may not be, something that Apple is very excited about doing for its customers, but I think it's something that will benefit them in the long run.
Yeah, so that I want to sort of drill in on that point that you made. This seems to be Apple looking at ways to deal with the current and upcoming legislation and regulation and a response to all of those things. I mean, what do we kind of think? Is Apple taking this opportunity to try? It reminds me of the movie industry, which back whenever Hollywood was kind of kicking off and they were figuring everything out, they went ahead and figured out their own rules and regulations for giving movies ratings and establishing a body to do that. Is this Apple saying, okay, we'll take care of this before the government or governments in many cases come in to try and make the rules on their end? And just from your personal sort of opinion, do you think that this is going to work, or are we still going to see regulation?
I think that it's definitely Apple's attempt to do that, but I think they're being a little bit recalcitrant about it. I think they're trying to make the smallest changes they can in order to sort of make those deals without having to give away too much. I don't think this is going to stop further regulation because you have a variety of different countries around the world that all have concerns, and those concerns may differ depending on the country. We've seen stuff from the EU about this. Just this past week, there was South Korea made a law, passed legislation about using in-app purchase systems. India, I think, is now also looking at in-app purchase systems on digital platforms. So I think this is a bigger and bigger wave that's growing here, and Apple is trying to get ahead of it, but I think they're doing not quite enough to actually forestall any of it. So it may be that they end up sort of cutting all these little deals all over the place, which may just sort of, erode away at what the App Store is doing and the way that it's traditionally been run. And in some ways, it seems like maybe they'd be better off about making these big proactive sweeping changes, but I don't think they want to do that because they'd rather, again, give away as little as they can in order to keep sort of the cash flowing.
Yeah, absolutely. Then sort of looking at the legislation and the requests and the complaints and things that are out there, Any idea what concessions Apple might make next if you had some predictions of where they could go now that they've allowed linking or now that they're going to allow linking for reader apps?
Yeah, I think the other big one that sort of remains out there is the in-app purchase system. This is the thing that Epic, the game company, has been suing Apple about. It's what I've just mentioned in South Korea being a potential issue. I think Apple wants to be very careful about how it handles this because obviously there exists the possibility that developers could exploit this, and for less reasonable, decisions because you can kind of make an end run around things, right? If you just say, hey, we've got this app, you download it, you install it, and then every other transaction is done via our website outside of the App Store, then essentially there is a point at which they're just sort of piggybacking on the App Store and Apple is making no money from that. And that can be both a good thing and a bad thing, depending on the exact nature of the applications in question. I think what's possible is that you'll see more loosening around the kind of things it's doing here for reader apps, potentially being expanded to other apps as well. That's a big question in terms of whether or not it will let apps that are not reader apps link to stuff outside in order to sort of move people towards other payment systems. Communications also, I think, is a big part of it. Like, how much will it let developers communicate directly with their customers and be able to sort of say, whether in the app or outside the app, that there are other options for them other than what they're being forced to use right now. So I think the purchase, it comes down to money as always. And so I think, you got to look at the places where Apple's making money and where developers making money and try to figure out where the balance there is going to be.
Thank you very much for answering that question. And Dan, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your move to join us to talk about this today. We'll, of course, be keeping an eye on what concessions come down the line next. Of course, folks can head to sixcolors.com to check out your work. But where else can folks go to find the great stuff you're doing?
Well, you can check me out on Twitter at dmoren. I'm also a science fiction author, and you can check out my books. Go to my website, dmoren.com, and see a full list of that, as well as every place that I write. And podcast, of course, with Mikah on Clockwise over at Relay FM every week. So check that out.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Dan. We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
All right. Thank you, Dan. Up next, totally shifting gears. 3D printing, but not 3D printing like, plastic kind of toys. And I don't know what people are 3D printing, to be honest, but 3D printing food. And is this the future of meat? Very interesting stuff. We're going to talk with Iain Thomson from The Register about that coming up. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Akamai. Akamai is the world's largest distributed edge compute platform. Akamai, they're the name in the business. You've heard of Akamai. If you would like to deliver extraordinary customer experiences as well as run code at the edge, well, that's what Akamai is all about. Truly powerful stuff, because Akamai has 10 times the locations of the nearest competitor. That's over 4,000 locations. And so as a result, you're always closer to your end user with Akamai. That cuts down on latency. That makes things faster because it's not coming from a distant area of the world. It's really close by. Akamai will also greatly improve your customer experience. So your customers are going to get content, apps, sites, video, all that they're looking for without lag, interruption, without that latency that I'm talking about, and especially latency during unexpected traffic spikes. It's all regulated. It's all controlled. You can actually prepare for spikes in demand and optimize the resources to provide the best experience for your customers. And you'll be amazed at that unparalleled performance coming from Akamai. And you'll always be one network hop away from 85% of the world's internet users. So it's just going to be fast for everyone. But what about scalability? Well, application architects get the flexibility to scale enterprise applications with Akamai Edge Workers. With Edge Workers, your development teams can focus on building while letting Akamai take care of the challenges of scaling globally. It's not easy to scale. You probably already know that, but Akamai handles it. And because Akamai empowers you to deploy serverless code at the edge, you won't experience the headaches of increased traffic at origin or the overheads that commonly go along with it. Akamai gives you the power to innovate right at the edge because your logic, your functions, they're all deployed and active at the nearest proximity to your end user. So you're getting the fastest end user experience around the globe. Akamai makes it simple to build right at the edge. Of course, using JavaScript so you can innovate in real time. You get that low latency access to data for custom code right at the edge. And Akamai can optimize your API traffic delivery for edge applications as well. But what is the cost? Even with its unrivaled intelligence, even with its amazing performance and scalability, Akamai is comparatively priced because limits are set per request. So you can be sure that your workload will scale no matter the size of your user base. And being serverless actually means you're going to see decreased overhead at origin too. So you win on all fronts. You know Akamai, you know their reputation. They're trusted by the biggest brands in the world, and you're getting 10 times the locations of competitors for the fastest customer experience available. So check out the Akamai website. Check it out for yourself. You can learn more about edge computing. You can have a conversation with them. You might be surprised by just how competitive the pricing is. Build closer to your end user with Akamai, the world's largest distributed edge compute platform. All you got to do is visit akamai.com/TNW. You can do that today, and you'll learn so much more by going there. That's akamai.com/TNW. And we thank Akamai for their support of Tech News Weekly. All right, 3D printing has come a long way. It was such a fad thing. Like, I feel like we're hearing so much about 3D printing, and then it just kind of became a thing. Like my kid, my daughter, she's in 6th grade. She has a maker class, and they're using a 3D printer in there. So it's to the point to where these printers are in classrooms, and like I can only imagine what it would be like if I was a kid, had access to that stuff. I'm super psyched for my daughter, but she's not making meat with her 3D printer. She's making, plastic things that she creates. But there's this whole world of food generation and food creation and interplaying with 3D printing. And seems kind of a little early at this stage, but it's there and at a good time. It seems like right now, this world needs alternatives when it comes to food for a number of reasons. So joining us to talk about this is Iain Thomson from The Register. Iain, it's been a while since we had you on this show. It's great to get you back.
Always fun, always a pleasure. But yes, this is a very odd topic, to say the least.
It is, but you know what? When I was researching this topic and looking into everybody who was writing it, and I saw that you had written about it, I was like, this seems like the topic that is perfect for Iain's perspective, because I love your sense of humor and I love bringing you onto the shows. This seems like a good one to riff on. So let's first of all, before we get into like 3D printing as the technology, I've never had Wagyu beef. I don't know if you have, but I know that it's very expensive. What's the deal? Why is it such a big deal?
Well, okay, I've had it. I've had it claimed to have been served once, but this was in San Francisco, and considering the very small amount of meat they actually let out of the country, I have my doubts. Basically, it's a very highly marbled form of beef with lots of fat running through it. The stuff we had was thin sliced, which you dip into a boiling pot of stock and then snarf down immediately. But you're looking at about a sort of a very high fat content to meat content. And the cows themselves are pampered to a level that you wouldn't believe. I mean, they are fed beer in some cases. They're massaged regularly to try and get more fat into the tissue. They're not sold until they're 3 years old. This is a very, very intensive stuff. And there are many kinds of Wagyu, but for the really top steaks, you're looking at about $300-400 for a small steak of it. Wow. It is apparently amazing. It melts in the mouth, but that's a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of carbon to actually get it out there.
Yeah, and I think that last point is pretty interesting as far as the relationship. You're right. It's a lot of carbon to do what we've done for forever. Raising cattle and doing the meat production that way. Then we have 3D printing of food, and at least on the surface, to my mind, that seems like a really great alternative if we can get the end product to be something that's close enough to the, let's say, the real thing. And I don't even know that we're anywhere near that right now. At least it doesn't sound like it with this story. What exactly is the process that the scientists related to the story that you wrote about? They're printing this Wagyu beef, or at least this is like the first stage of that. What was the process that they used in order to do this? Like, what kind of material are they using? What was the result?
Well, they still used a live cow. A now dead cow, but basically they harvested two types of stem cells from that animal and then used that to culture muscle, fat, and blood vessel tissue. Wow. And in really quite sort of amazing quantities, and then use the 3D printer to lay down strips between about 500 and 750 microns thick to build up this piece of what looks ostensibly like Wagyu beef, albeit rather unpleasantly looking. But I agree with you. This is where we're going to have to come from on this, because just putting 10 pounds of grass into a cow to get 1 pound of beef is hopelessly uneconomic. It has a massive cost for the planet, and this kind of thing could really help. Cultured meat could be the way that humanity actually gets over this hump, because while vegetarianism is popular in the West and necessary in poorer nations, it's a thing of necessity in poorer nations, humanity can't get rid of its meat habit. And this could be a way to actually give us the meat without the bad consequences once we can get the technology right.
Yeah, indeed. A little bit unrelated. Well, it's related, but I don't know if it's right exactly where we are in this conversation, but I couldn't help it. Scooter X in the chat room posted a link to a Costco page for Wagyu beef. 12 ounces, 4 count, 3 pounds, $450. $150 per pound. So, this particular cut is expensive, and those are Costco prices too. They usually end up being at least a little bit expensive. You're buying a lot up front, but you're getting at least a little bit of a discount. So there's a cost savings. Then, of course, there's the carbon footprint savings. But you're still saying that it still requires, at least at this stage, it still requires the stem cells. Is this kind of technology something that can get to the point to where it can detach itself completely from cows and could be completely sustainably grown on its own? It would alleviate anyone who has, a problem with the fact that there's an actual animal involved in the production of this material, or whatever you want to call it.
Well, yes. That is the eventual goal. At the moment, we can't actually do it. But the signs are good. For example, there's a brewery in London who has had the same strain of yeast cultivated since the 1850s, which they still use in their beer. So you can, if you can get a self-replicating cultural synthesis going, then you might be able to taking animals out of the food chain. At the moment, it's still very early days. But it's a possibility. But what this offers is a way to create large amounts of foodstuffs which humanity wants without the large-scale raising of animals, which has been our traditional way.
Yeah, indeed. One thing that stood out for me in your article is this idea that like this customization aspect to food. We're used to customizing our food when we prepare it. But what they're talking about here is the potential that at some point, if 3D printing meat is a possibility, and especially this particular type of meat, the Wagyu beef, where you're talking about all that marbled fat and everything like that, someone could actually dial in like, I like this percentage of fat more than the other, and almost customize the meat to whoever they're serving it to. And I guess that opens up a whole range of opportunity and options for people. I don't know that we necessarily see anything quite like that right now, but
I honestly think it's coming. And this is something the team of boffins from Osaka University were very keen to point out, that you could do this. You can make customizable meat with the kind of content that you want. I have to say my thought was also that, if you're a tech billionaire and you really want to impress some people, then, you serve up a slab of beef with your portrait on it or the company logo on it. And that's perfectly possible with 3D printing.
Oh my goodness. Now suddenly I lost my appetite.
I know. I do honestly think this is going to be the showing off item of the food world for VCs and certain tech billionaires.
Yeah. They're going to have one of these things in their
consumption is a thing.
they're going to have one of these things in their spaceship that's taking them to Middle Earth orbit, as they go out for dinner and orbit
Don't
around
even
the
get me
planet.
started on Bezos and Branson, but there have been some epic rants about that.
Yeah, I could totally see it. Now you mentioned that this first effort, as much as we're talking about food, the first effort was inedible. It's basically, it's almost like a proof of concept. I don't know what the size of it was, but you included a picture and it looked like this tiny little fleshy morsel thing. It did not look very appealing, let's just say. But a good first effort. I suppose you got to start somewhere. Are other food printing efforts similar to this, but printing different things? Like, are they edible where this one is not? Like, where do we stand, if you happen to know, as far as 3D printing actual edible food?
Okay, yeah, well, you're right. It was a very, very small piece of food. It was basically 1 centimeter by 0.5 centimeter. So in freedom units, that's about 1/3 of an inch by maybe a 1/6 of an inch, and was inedible. But the team say they are working on using gelatin as a base for this, which gelatin we eat every day. So that's a possibility. I mean, typically with culturing meat, the focus has been on actually getting the meat out there. So it was hamburgers originally with, Sergey Brin's $250,000 burger, but that's basically meat mush. If you're talking about 3D printing actual steaks and that sort of thing, looking at the current available research, we're at least 2 years away from that, possibly longer. There are certain ways that the stem cells have to bind, which still has to be sorted out, and you need a medium that you can grow this stuff in, which humans can eat.
I'm fascinated by all this stuff. I mean, take 3D printing of food out of the way, and we still have a very interesting kind of developing technology around creating meat alternatives, impossible meat, and these other meat alternatives that are out there. Coming at the right time, or maybe they should have come earlier than now, would have probably been more of the right time. But seems like at least we have alternatives, because I think as we go on and, future generations are going to really need to rely on stuff like that eventually. If you were served a further developed tiny morsel of Wagyu beef similar to this, would you eat it?
Ooh, that's a tricky one. If I'd read the paper beforehand, yes, but with a caveat that you've got to understand the technology. Look, it's got so much better. I dated a lass at the turn of the century who was a vegetarian, and she introduced me to this. She was an American, and she introduced me to stuff called Morningstar bacon, which was just foul. And now, as you say, with Impossible Foods, I tasted the Impossible Burger, and you're like, this is better than a burger I've had at many meat restaurants. So, this is the way we're going, and this is the way it should be going. But, you've got to make it palatable to people. And part of they always say with cooking, the first bite is with the eye, and the ability to 3D print this stuff into pleasing formations is a big step in taking that forward.
Yeah, indeed. Fascinating stuff. Iain, thank you so much for carving out a few minutes in your morning to talk with us today. Iain Thomson writes for The Register, is very regularly on This Week in Tech, and you're just an all-around awesome guy. So thank you for hopping on today. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, Jason. Cheers.
We'll talk with you soon. Morningstar sausage patties.
Oh, my goodness. The Morningstar bacon is truly terrible. Oh,
I did have.
The color is wrong. The texture is wrong.
I just looked up a picture of it. I was like, yeah, that doesn't look very appealing. I did have, for my first time, Impossible meat. A couple of weeks ago, I made Impossible burgers. And I didn't tell the kids, to kind of see what they thought. Now, my 11-year-old loved it, ate it. It was totally fine. My 8-year-old took one bite and she was like, that's a weird burger. So I don't know, like she was like clued into something. I still didn't let her know. But one thing I did notice is when we make regular burgers, I always flatten them out and make them larger than the end result because, the fat burns off and it kind of shrinks down a little bit and everything. And with the Impossible meat, I did that too. And I ended up with just these gigantic patties that were too big for the bun because they don't shrink because there's no real fat there to like burn away. So lesson learned as far as cooking with alternative meats.
That's a weird burger. That's hilarious. Oh,
yes.
I think they're quite good. I used to buy them all the time. They're just a little expensive. So
they have them at Costco. That's what we did.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Yeah. Well, up next, we are going to talk about digital IDs. Is this a convenience or is it a concern? Well, we'll talk about that in a second. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by, you know who it is. It's Melissa. Having accurate customer address data is crucial to the success of your business. Did you know that nearly 36 million address changes were processed by the USPS in 2020? Whoa, that is a huge chunk of customers you could be missing out on. 30% of customer data goes bad each year, but Melissa can help make sure your data is current and accurate. Melissa's tools have helped businesses maintain fresh data for over 35 years, which explains why over 10,000 businesses trust the address experts. Melissa has a renewal rate of over 92%. That's proof that companies love Melissa, and you will too. You can verify addresses, emails, phone numbers, and names in real time with Melissa. Melissa's global address verification service verifies addresses for 240 plus countries and territories at the point of entry. If you're tired of having duplicate customer information in your database, well, with Melissa's data matching, you can eliminate clutter and duplicates, increase accuracy of the database, and reduce postage and mailing costs. Get the information that completes your customer profiles better. Add consumer demographic info to your records, such as marital status or social media handles. Melissa's flexible deployment options offer different platforms to suit any preference, business size, or budget. With flexible on-premise web service, secure FTP processing, and software as a service delivery options. Melissa also has their new Lookups app on iOS and Google to search addresses, names, and more at your fingertips. Melissa continually undergoes independent security audits to reinforce their commitment to data security, privacy, and compliance requirements. That's SOC 2, HIPAA, and GDPR compliance. Melissa's Global Support Center also offers 24/7 world-renowned support if you sign up for a service level agreement, so you can inquire today. Melissa is still supporting communities and qualifying essential workers during COVID-19, so you can see if your organization qualifies for 6 months of free service by applying online at melissa.com. And of course, we'd also like to congratulate Melissa for being named a leader in address verification and data quality by G2 Crowd in their spring 2021 report. Awesome job. Make sure your customer contact data is up to date. Try Melissa's APIs in the developer portal. It's easy to log on, sign up, and start playing in the API sandbox 24/7. Get started today with 1,000 records cleaned for free at melissa.com/twit. That's melissa.com/twit. Thanks so much, Melissa, for sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly. All right. So Apple at one of its recent conferences, at one of its recent product announcements, talked about a new feature that would be coming in the next version of iOS that would allow folks to store a digital version of their driver license or their state ID in their Apple Wallet. So for those of you with iPhones and you've got the side button, you double tap that side button and that lets you use Apple Pay, for example, but you can also use it to show your ticket to get on a boarding pass for an airplane or a ticket to an event, et cetera, et cetera. One thing that people have been talking about for a while is, what about a digital version of our ID? So when also we need to get on a flight, we can show it there as well. And also maybe that means that we can go even more paperless or walletless or purseless if we want to, where our phone has all of these things. Apple announced this, but of course, this new feature comes with a requirement that states have to play ball. And so we saw early on that there were a couple of states that were going to be doing so. And Vice's Motherboard publication has some more. There's Arizona, Georgia, Kentucky, Maryland, Oklahoma, Connecticut, and Utah are some of the countries that are looking at participating in this, that will let them use their ID to go through airport security. Now, with this comes a conversation surrounding the privacy and security implications of keeping your ID in digital form on your phone. And the conversation surrounds whether it is a good idea to hand your phone over to, frankly, anyone, but particularly anyone who is in the business of law enforcement, wherever that may be. And so this story kind of talks about the concerns here. And I want to quote from the article. Multiple court decisions have been made in recent years determining what kind of access law enforcement can get to someone's private device. In 2014, for example, Los Angeles police officers were granted a warrant in an identity theft case to use someone's finger to bypass the Touch ID on their phone. Judges in Idaho and California have ruled that using someone's biometric data to unlock the device violated the Fifth Amendment because it counts as a testimonial or information that can be withheld to protect them from self-incrimination. That said, there are many police departments across the country who use tools to, get into these devices that can sort of bypass the encryption on the device or find some way to unlock the device. And in some cases where the rulings have not been made, can attempt to persuade the person to unlock the device with their face or their fingerprint. And so there's just kind of a conversation surrounding whether this is a great idea. I've seen a lot of folks in the tech journalist space basically saying, no matter what, don't hand over your phone. Just keep your driver license, your state ID, and use that as your means of identification. That having it as a digital copy where you are in need of handing it over is not a good idea. But some others have talked about the convenience of it, the accessibility of it, and also the technology surrounding it, which includes near-field communication options for giving people the opportunity to just, tap on the terminal at an airport and it shares your boarding pass and your ID at the same time. You're authenticated, you get to move on. But then that involves a hefty amount of education that needs to take place where you tell people, hey, you don't have to hand over your phone in order for this authentication to work. Here's how it's done. And what happens if the authentication doesn't work? It feels a little bit like when Apple Pay and Google Wallet or Google Pay all rolled out in the United States. A lot of other countries have been doing it for a long time, so they were good with contactless. But I remember for a long time, I was very, very hesitant to use Apple Pay because I was worried it wasn't going to work and I was going to be holding up someone behind me and that there were going to be these issues. And now I use it all over the place. And with this, I feel good about the NFC aspect of it, the ability to just tap my phone at an airport terminal and move on. I don't feel good about having even more of my personal data and information and my sort of tying those things together in one place, because suddenly a phone that is that has all of my personal information on it but doesn't have my ID on it, maybe that is more of a means of arguing that that's not my phone. That's that could be anybody's phone. But whenever you've got your authenticated driver license or state ID on there, then that's more proof that, hey, this is my device, and whatever it is that you think is incriminating or that you need for X, Y, or Z, you can use. That is a concern. So I'm curious, Jason, kind of how you feel about this in general. You think it's a good convenience factor, and what's your take on the privacy implications here?
I hadn't really considered the fact that when storing something like a driver's license onto a device, like the possibility or the what you pointed out as far as like having to hand over the phone in order to show the ID, ultimately that gives access to the phone. Whereas, if I just had the driver's license in my pocket, that would be an easy way to just be like, well, here's the one thing that you need instead of here's the everything that I have.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I hadn't really considered that. I think prior to hearing that, I probably would have been like, yeah, the convenience factor seems really great. Like I'm the same as you as far as Google Pay or Android Pay or Google Wallet or the 5 million names it's had at this point. When it first came out, it's all about establishing trust, right? Trust in the technology, trust in the kind of the privacy and security aspects of it. But really, for me, it was like, do I trust this system enough that I can leave the house with my phone and without my wallet, and know that when I get to the store after the drive and after the shopping and everything, I'm not going to get to the register and have it not work and then have to go home and get my wallet anyways. That was like a large hill for me to get over. And eventually I got there, but not without many hiccups along the way where I was like, see, this is why I don't trust it yet, because I did it. And now I have to go home and get my wallet because it still didn't work. Now it's less so there. So it took a while to build up that trust. Throwing all of my specifically highly, highly personal information like a driver's license or social security card or whatever the heck you would put in there for secure storage seems like another level of trust. Do I trust the system to not abuse the fact that I have this highly sensitive information there? Do I trust that it's going to be sufficient? I find myself in a situation and I show my ID and then like, actually, we don't accept that. And I don't have my actual, true ID with me. What kind of trouble do I get in then? All these things, for me, it just really comes down to trust. And it's too early. Like Android doesn't have this yet. Apple seems to be kind of paving the way for this. Android will have some of this. There's going to be like a digital key for your car that I think is going to be integrated with Android 12. And that's kind of like the open door for more of this technology coming in on Android. So it's right on the precipice of happening with Apple devices and with Google's devices and with Android devices. But again, I think it's going to take some time to establish trust, and we don't know whether that trust is, the validity of that trust or not.
There you go.
Unfortunately, until, this plays out a little bit and we see, okay, has it been abused? And if so, then heck no, I'm not going to put my ID in there because it's way easier for me to just get one of those cases with a little sleeve in it and keep my driver's license in there. And then, but I don't know, maybe that changes over time. That's kind of where my thoughts go, though, is really just around trust.
Captain Jack in the Discord said, as long as these are not mandatory and they're just a convenience, I think it's fine.
Right.
I think that's a really good point, is that this is just another option that you can have, that a state doesn't completely stop issuing physical state IDs or driver licenses at this point. That certainly makes me feel better about it in general. But yeah, I go back to, I just saw the other day a little clip of a guy driving his Tesla, and I don't know if this specific story was, or this specific video and everything was a setup, or if it was real, but it speaks to a specific point. So let me kind of get into it. He was driving his Tesla, and that some Tesla models have that huge display that's the center console, and it does the AC and the music and everything, and has your battery on it, yada, yada, yada. It is the center console. And he got pulled over by a police officer who said that you can't have what amounts to like a giant phone or tablet on your dashboard, that you are not supposed to be driving distracted. And he almost got a ticket for driving distracted, and had to explain to the police officer what the vehicle was, that was his center console that had all of his information, that's how the car works, that there's no way to remove that's what it is. And it was this whole process. And so it just made me think about how many, if you did happen to get pulled over, or you were questioned or whatever, and had to show your ID, and you pull out your phone, and then suddenly the police officer, whomever, says that isn't going to be enough. And then you have to, there's just like all of that's involved. So it's messy even before this thing kicks off. And it'll be interesting to see how this all rolls out. But yeah, I think ultimately, if there's any sort of hard and fast conclusion that I come to, I think that it's very important that folks not underestimate the importance and necessity of protection of the data that they have on their personal devices, and just keeping all of that in mind should you choose to use a convenient feature like this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's worth taking a moment to really understand what it means when you move this information onto your phone and what the possibilities of that are. But if it's a feature that Apple or Google is introducing, a lot of people are just going to be like, oh, cool, I could do that. And they're just going to do it. And, it's worth taking a pause and thinking about like, well, is it necessary? What is the benefit to you? Like, do you actually get any benefit from it? Like, maybe it's a very marginal benefit considering the trade-off, and I think a lot of people aren't going to spend the time to think about that or consider that. But it's definitely worth considering. Cool. All right. I have my story of the week coming up, and it's not really a story. It's a phone. I'm just going to hold it up. It's a phone that does a little foldy thing. That's a little bit of a hint, but I'm not going to open it up yet. So I'm going to talk about that and do a little bit of a first look at the Z Fold 3. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Checkout.com. Tech shouldn't stifle innovation. Actually, tech and innovation go hand in hand. Traditional payment systems, they're heavily layered, they're disconnected, they're perceived as a cost center to the business. And modern businesses actually need a flexible payment system that can actually help them to do things like adapt to change, grow, scale fast. Recently, we came across a company with tech that approaches payments through a radical new lens, and that's Checkout.com. Checkout.com partnered with Oxford Economics. They actually conducted an end-to-end analysis of the payments value chain for merchants. And last year alone, false declines cost the UK, the US, French, and German markets $20.3 billion. $12.7 billion went to competitors. $7.6 billion was entirely written off. Crazy stuff. The study found that merchants are not currently optimizing the consumer's significant willingness to pay for speed, for convenience, for security online. The majority of merchants who were surveyed don't actually feel that their payments data is informing their business strategy or their innovation. And 56% of customers surveyed said they won't return to a site because they did not offer their preferred payment method. I know that firsthand. Most merchants spend more than 10% of their payments budgets on fixing disputes, fraud, and outages. So CEOs, they're more likely to overestimate the quality of data returned to them by payment providers. CEOs tend to underestimate the extent to which disconnected payments are actually hindering their growth. And most merchants focus on the per transaction costs of their payments. And by doing so, they're ignoring completely the back end costs. Checkout.com is a leading cloud-based global payment solutions provider. Checkout's payment platform is purpose-built with simplicity, scalability, and speed in mind. It's ideal for merchants who are looking to seamlessly integrate better payment solutions globally. And Checkout.com offers just a number of things. Improved acceptance globally, so better, more actionable, granular data along with that. A flexible product structure that merchants can actually adapt to their needs. And it's combined with truly personal white glove service. And it's totally why brands across the globe like Pizza Hut, TransferWise, Klarna, Revolut, even Samsung trust Checkout.com. And I mean, Checkout, supports kind of the modern payment methods, Apple Pay, and yes, Google Pay. Love that. I love being able to use my Android phone to pay at places. So having that with Checkout.com, a no-brainer. Checkout.com is the dominant choice for organizations who are looking for the fastest, most innovative and reliable global payment solution provider. You can request a free, no-commitment demo at checkout.com/TNW. That's checkout.com/TNW for a free demo. And that's the URL you need to know, checkout.com/TNW. And we thank checkout.com for their support of Tech News Weekly. All right, so what do I have in my hands? Actually, it's been a weird 7 days because all at once I received a ton of new hardware. I've got the Galaxy Watch Classic, the Galaxy Watch 4 Classic on my wrist, and I've been enjoying this for the past week.
Galaxy Watch Classy.
Yeah, it is pretty. I gotta say, it is a pretty classy watch. I really do like the design of it, and so far, I really like the watch itself. I got the Flip, which I'm not going to talk about today, anyways. I'm going to talk about that at a future time. But I got the Galaxy Z Flip 3. So this is the Samsung foldable that goes from the little square into a normal size phone. So that's neat, but that's not for today.
Is it off?
It is off right now. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was like, why isn't it lighting up?
Yeah, because I turned it off before the show because it was making lots of noises, and I was like, I don't want to take the chance. So I've just been setting up these devices, and I don't have that one perfectly set up yet. But I thought I'd spend a little time just going hands-on with the Galaxy Z Fold 3. So Samsung, at their announcement, a few weeks back, unveiled all of these three devices that I've mentioned here. The Z Fold 3 is definitely the device that is the top of the line of what they announced there, right? Premiumest of premium smartphones, I would say. Which we could talk a little in a few minutes about what actually makes a premium smartphone. But in this case, it's feature set because it does very interesting things like the foldable display out to a much larger interior display. But it's also costly. This thing is $1,799, so $1,799. Yeah, for the 256 gig model, and then $1,899 for the 512 gig model. So you're paying for the innovation. It does have a fingerprint sensor on the side, and my fingers are a little sweaty, so it's not working. Okay, well, I'm going to have to do the pin then, I guess. All right, so what do we have here? Just real quick, I can rattle off a few things. Two displays. As you saw, there's a display on the front. When it works, it keeps locking when I close it, and that's not what I wanted. Dang it.
It does not like your fingerprint.
It doesn't. I did set it up before the show, and it was working, but I don't know what's going on. Anyways, it has the display on the outside, and on the inside, obviously, both AMOLED, both 120 hertz. So it has like a high refresh rate display on both ends. The front display is a tall 6.2 inch display. It's actually a 24.5 to 9 aspect ratio.
Interesting.
And so, you've got the little frame here, the little hinge area. So that makes the bezel kind of come in a little bit. It ends up being kind of a narrow-ish device, which like in my hands right now might seem normal, but as I use it, it definitely does. And it was the same with the Z Fold 2. Definitely feels narrow. Like when you get a full keyboard on the device and you're trying to, be really accurate with punching out a text message or whatever, the keys feel really narrow. Everything's just like squished in there. But it's better than nothing. It's better than the first one where it was like even smaller and it was like a portion of the front. It looked really funky and weird. Now, so they've made this so that it's more or less, a normal phone when you're on the outside, and that's good. Unfolded, the inside display is a 7.6 inch display. And, the screen types are different. Obviously, this is a foldable, so you can kind of see there's a little bit of a crease there. Mm-hmm. Everybody ends up pointing to the crease on the foldable because it's like, it's not perfect.
Can you feel the crease?
I mean, yeah, you can feel it. It dips down. Okay. It's a little bit of a dip there. But, I remember early on when these foldables were happening, this was like in my mind without ever having one in my hands. I was like, oh, that's a deal breaker. That's lame. I want it to be seamless and blah, blah, blah. And to be honest, like with the Z Fold 2, it really didn't end up bugging me. Right now, I don't know if I'm just getting more used to the fact that they exist and that they're there and it's just a part of the technology, but it's really not the end of the world. Right. I have seen some of these devices where that does start to deteriorate. So from a durability standpoint, that can be a little concerning. But obviously this is brand new, so I'm not seeing.
Do you always blow on it before you close it?
No, I never think to do that. To get the dust out of there, that's probably a good point. I mean, when you close it, I don't know if this is.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's smart. Here. Okay.
It has, I'm trying to hold it so that the camera can see. It has a little bit of like a teardrop pass through there. So it's not like the display is perfectly sandwiched on top of the other display. Okay. It has a little bit of a bumper on both of these edges, so it lifts it slightly. So if something's going to get caught in there, it's got to be like a large something.
Yeah, you would
it's got to
see
be a large
for sure.
pebble or something. You know what I mean? So that's good. Let's see what else. Oh, so I don't have it.
Where are all of the cameras, and which ones are the good ones, and which ones are they just had to have one there?
All right. Well, so there is a front camera that is the cutout. I don't know if you can here. Let's see if it'll.
Yeah,
focus.
right above that lock button.
Yeah, you can kind of see it vaguely up at the very top there. On the back, we do have the three cameras, all 12 megapixels. But I mean, these are Samsung's lenses. I would say that the camera system on this is not the top of the line. Like, you're not getting Galaxy S21 Ultra style cameras here, which I think were about as definitive as Samsung's cameras get on their devices. But you're still getting good quality cameras. I would imagine, I haven't tested these yet, but I would imagine these cameras are going to produce some pretty great images. And then the one that really stands out is the front-facing one. Let's see if my fingerprint sensor works.
So you get two front-facing cameras. Interesting.
Yeah, so let's see here. I'm trying to, I have night mode on, and I want it off so that I can actually show the pass through here. But let's see, do I have a single app that'll show it? Let's see here. Yes, okay, fine. Yes, I'm in. Now everything's on night mode. But there is up here, you can vaguely see it's a pass-through camera. It's underneath the display. And instead of it being a total cutout, so a cutout would just be, you know, the hole punch that we're used to seeing. It is a, it's like a lower pixel density camera up at the top. So when you have so essentially it shows pixels. Let's see if I can get this night mode off. There's got to be a setting for dark mode. Okay, we'll tweak that off. Okay, there we go. Now if I can hold this up there, I'm trying my best so you can see. Yeah. There are pixels there, but they're a lower pixel density. And so what that allows for is when you fire off the camera, those pixels that are there turn off. And so it allows the camera to shine through mostly unobstructed. But I mean, there's still a layer in front of it, right?
Right.
And so I haven't tested it yet, but that's like one of the big questions is this a good trade-off? If it was a hole punch, it would be an unobstructed camera and it would be as good as the camera is. Right now, we have this like layer of pixels that have darkened, but it's still a layer for that camera to pass through. And is that going to produce images that are as good or, you know, maybe slightly deteriorated or whatever? And that seems to be what people are saying.
It's an interesting way of doing things.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we've seen some phones do this so far, but this is, I would say, the biggest phone. You know, this is the biggest release doing it right now. So I'm really curious to play around with that. Let's see here.
When you have the phone open and you have that camera on the other side, well, I guess you have a lot of cameras on the other side. Can you use so on the back side of this, can you use your display that's on the back side as a viewfinder so basically I'm saying you switch it around and like face it at yourself. Can you use that screen as a viewfinder?
I believe
so like a selfie, basically, where you could actually see yourself as you're taking a photo of yourself.
I'm pretty, it's been a while since I had the, let's see here. I'm totally just, okay, cover screen preview on. Okay, so there we go.
Ah, cool.
So there you are. There's the mode. I was like, I know you can. I know the feature is here somewhere. So now you can see the camera that I used to shoot these overheads. But yes, there you go. So now, you know, if I wanted to, I could, and I could take the picture and I could see myself through that camera.
Neat.
Yeah, and then it does other things too, like when you fold it slightly, you end up with
kind of cool.
Kind of a different layout. So I've got my little preview there. I've got my control panel. If I was to take some pictures, I get a little last image.
That's kind of neat.
Window there. Yeah, kind of neat layout stuff that really differentiates it from other things. It also allows you to set this up, right? So if I was doing a group shot, I could set this up and position this perfectly, and it's kind of like its own tripod.
How does it feel? Does it feel hefty and premium quality? Like, is that stainless steel on the sides? Is it aluminum?
Yeah, it's aluminum. It's a higher grade aluminum, I think, than the previous version. They've upgraded the hinge, so the hinge looks like a tank now. That was what really failed the original, the first one that, failed miserably and, got all sorts of bad press. They've continued to work on the hinge, so it feels strong. It's also the first one that is IPX8 certified. Last year's had no water protection. This one can resist 5 feet of water up to 30 minutes. And, partially due to the upgraded hinge system. No dust protection, though. So
it's like X there.
Yeah. The outside glass is Gorilla Glass Victus, which is kind of like the latest and best of Gorilla Glass. The inside, it's the foldable display, so it's different. And I don't know how strong or how,
it's chimpanzee glass.
That's going to be. Yes, right. But yeah, I think it feels hefty. It feels, you're paying for an $1,800 phone. You want a phone that doesn't, feel hollow or insignificant. And actually it's a little heavy as well, which, on one hand can be kind of a downside, because one of the other features that this has is it supports, when I can have it unlock. Now it's not doing it again. When I can actually get into the phone. The inside display is operatable by the S Pen, which Samsung's S Pen was on the Note series for a very long time. Note series didn't happen this year. In place, they're doing S Pen support for the Fold 3. It's a specialized S Pen that works only on the interior display. So the specialized S Pen, can do it without scratching the display, so that's great. Downside to this is that S Pen will not work on the front display area, which is kind of a letdown, because when you take the Note use case, it was always like, just pull out your phone, pop out the S Pen, and jot down something really quick. And in this case, if you want to do that, A, you have to have a case that houses the S Pen somewhere. I don't have an S Pen to show off. And B, if you want to take a quick note, you do have to open it up, have the S Pen ready. And with the size of this and the weight of it, holding it with one hand, you got to be really certain that you're not going to drop this sucker. Because if you do, it's $1,800, So that's a little bit of a trade-off there. And I don't know that it's necessarily going to appeal or appease Note fans, because this is
one other question.
Yeah.
Does it at any point feel like it's spring-loaded to open or close, or is every part of the closing and opening process at the same resistance? Does it have a point at which it kind of snaps closed or snaps open, or is it resistance every step of the way? Okay,
it's resistance
that makes me feel
every
better.
Step of the way. Yeah.
In terms of using it as a notepad, if I had it open like that, if it did have kind of a spring thing, I'd be worried about putting my fingers on either side of it, because I'd be worried it would snap close while I'm writing.
Oh, yeah. No kidding.
That's good.
No, it's actually pretty. I mean, it's a strong hinge. It really does feel very sturdy. You can put it in any position and it's just going to stay there. You couldn't even do the old flip phone snap shut thing. You know what I mean? It hardly does it, which is either a good or a bad thing, depending on who you're asking, because a lot of people enjoy the snap to close thing. But anyways, so it's an interesting device. Like I said, I haven't really spent much time with it, but I plan to, and I will, at some point give it a full review. I mean, $1,800 is a lot of money to spend on any smartphone. Yeah. But this is kind of Samsung's cutting edge, right? This is pushing the envelope. This obviously they're trying new things. This is the first time that they've done the in-display camera. That's not a cutout. So they're trying some of their newer technologies here, and the way Samsung works. In a couple of years, you're probably going to see that in-display camera, if the technology continues to improve, be a standard across their other flagship devices, and that just seems to be how Samsung goes. And I wouldn't be surprised if you see that in somewhere down the line. I imagine if this is a technology that's really fleshed out and there is no quality hit, companies like Apple, they're probably working on this too, to kind of see can we get rid of the notch? Can we do something to where that display is unobstructed and there isn't the trade-off? I'm sure they're all working on it. I just don't know how possible that is, but eventually I'm sure it will be. Yeah. So that is the Galaxy Z Fold 3.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah. Do you see, are you at all interested in foldables? I know.
I think they
have any, but
they don't. I think they have some really cool use cases that I find interesting, and certainly as a tech enthusiast, I enjoy. But in terms of making a device like that, my EDC, my everyday carry, I am still not 100% sold. I think that it's still too thick when it's folded for me.
Yeah.
And then like you mentioned, then the screen is sort of narrower. And so you give up too much for having a foldable device for me. So I think that the technology still needs to advance a little bit more before I would feel like it was actually worth making that change and paying that price at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, it is a thick device, it's almost twice as thick as a normal smartphone, because that's essentially what it is two smartphones with a hinge system, and a single seamless display. So that's where it's at right now. I have no doubts that it's going to get more miniaturized and everything over time. So it'll be interesting if we could just jump ahead 5 years from now and see what kind of foldables exist then. I don't think the foldable category is going away. I think it's definitely an interesting,
I agree.
Interesting thing. And especially like the Z Flip, I feel like Samsung's probably going to sell a lot of these. I think this could end up being one of the most successful. They seem to be
pretty popular in these early responses that I've seen.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a pretty awesome device. So that's that. We've reached the end of this episode of Tech News Weekly. Y'all are awesome for watching and listening each and every Thursday. We do this show, twit.tv/TNW. Just go there and subscribe and you won't miss a single episode.
We should also mention Club Twit. If you would like to get all of our shows ad-free, check out Club Twit for $7 a month. Not only do you get every single one of the Twit shows that we offer free of ads, so you can just listen right through whenever you like, but you also get access to the members-only Twit Plus bonus feed that has content you won't find anywhere else, outtakes, behind-the-scenes stuff, special content from us hosts and producers, and access to the members-only Discord server, where just earlier I quoted Captain Jack from the Discord. It's a great place where you can hang out with the hosts and everybody over at Twit, as well as all of the fellow Club Twit members. Again, just $7 a month. Head to twit.tv/clubtwit to check it out. If you would like to tweet at me, I'm at Mikah Sargent on Twitter and at Mikah Sargent on many a social media network. You should also check out later today, Smart Tech Today, which I do with Matthew Casanelli, if you're into the smart home and all of that kind of Internet of Things stuff. And tomorrow I record iOS Today with Rosemary Orchard, although starting next week, we will be going back to our original time of Tuesday at 9 a.m. Pacific. So you'll be able to tune in then as well to watch iOS Today, where we talk all things iOS, tvOS, watchOS, HomePodOS, all the OSs Apple has on offer. It's a great time. All right, Jason, what about you?
Nice. You can find me on Twitter at Jason Howell, doing shows here at Twit, all about Android, twit.tv/AAA. I think that's about it. Just look on twit.tv. You'll find me. But big thanks to John Ashley at the studio for doing the show behind the scenes, Burke, John Slanina, everybody who helps us test our guests and wrangle them and bring them onto the show each and every week. And thanks to you for watching and listening. We'll see you next Thursday on Tech News Weekly. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
So you got yourself the brand new latest and greatest iPhone or Samsung smartphone because you heard about all of the beautiful photography those things can create. But for some reason, you're just not quite getting it done when you try to make your photos. Or you got yourself a brand new camera because you were interested in getting started in photography. But your little new inexpensive camera still isn't quite cutting it. Well, you need to check out my show, Hands-on Photography, here on Twit. I'm going to show you how to be a better photographer and a better post-processor, and quite frankly, just help you get the most out of that new camera that's either on your phone or the brand new one that you just got for your birthday or gifts or what have you. And it's going to be a lot of fun. So head on over to twit.tv/hop. That's twit.tv/HOP and subscribe today.